Troy Aikman dishes on Jeff Hafley, a lotto ticket, and the hire that may have been too good for Miami's own good. All that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Special thank you to each and every one of you who've helped to make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Today on the show, Troy Aikman dished on Rich Eisen about his experience in hiring for the Dolphins and their GM and head coaching search. We also have a potential hire that may not come to pass for the Dolphins because of reports that the candidate the Dolphins picked to fill one of their coaching staff roles may be up for an even better role somewhere else. And we also have the first scratch-off ticket of the season. The 2026 offseason for Miami. Probably going to have a number of scratch-off tickets due to what Miami's going to be doing from a roster and salary cap perspective. So we'll talk about the first lotto scratch-off of the offseason. But let's start with Troy Aikman. Right? Troy obviously was brought on as a consult for the Dolphins GM search, and then he was asked to stay on for the Dolphins search for a head coach. And the most interesting thing that Troy Aikman talked about, he did an interview yesterday with Rich Eisen on the Rich Eisen show. And I thought the most interesting thing that he talked about was how early Jeff Hafley got on his radar as a future NFL coach, and the company that Troy Aikman chose to put Jeff Hafley in, as far as when I sit down with guys I don't know and we do production meetings and they're not head coaches. He named two other names plus Jeff Hafley that it had the same process of sitting down for a production meeting and meeting this coordinator and say, hey, he's going to be an NFL head coach someday. It's pretty good company that Troy Aikman put Jeff Hafley in. And I would just say this, if Troy Aikman is right with both the GM hire and the head coaching hire, Troy's going to get a statue. At least for me, I'll make one myself if I have to, and I'll fly it down. And I'll park it right next to Danny's outside of Hard Rock Stadium. I don't care. I'll do it. If Troy and his fingerprints are all over this version of the Dolphins, if this is the version that gets the Dolphins back to significance and prominence 2, 3, 4 years from now, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be a big Troy Aikman stan, right? But I always have enjoyed hearing Troy in the booth. And this interview that he did with Rich Eisen was very enlightening, talking about quarterback experience going to the Super Bowl, the whole nine. But I want to read the quote that he had about Jeff Hafley. And remember, he said, he got the call out of the blue. The Dolphins had asked around. I know Jimmy Johnson was one of the people that they asked, and Troy Aikman's name kept coming up. So the Dolphins asked Troy to do the consult with the GM stuff. He does the legwork. They go through the hiring process. They hire John Eric Sullivan, and then they ask him to stay on for head coaches. And here's what Troy Aikman had to say about the impression and how early the impression was that Jeff Hafley left on him, how early he knew that Jeff Hafley was going to be a head coach. In broadcasting, this is Troy Aikman speaking to Rich Eisen. Obviously, I've been doing this a long time, 25 years. There have been coaches who I've had in production meetings with them who I don't know. As soon as I meet them, I've said, wow, this guy's not going to be a coordinator for long. He's going to be a head coach real soon. I thought Mike Vrabel was that guy. I thought DeMeco Ryans was that guy. And I'll tell you, I felt that way about Jeff Hafley a year ago back in 24 when we did the Packers. Our first production meeting with Jeff, I remember saying to our crew, this guy's going to be a head coach real soon. And he had already been in college. I believe he checks all the boxes. I really do. So you put Jeff Hafley in the same light and conversation as Vrabel and DeMeco Ryans, and you get some people's attention, including my own. Right. And it gives you some insight into Aikman and where the production meetings kind of brought some value to this process for Miami and the decision that they ultimately made And whether or not it's right or wrong is going to depend on the execution of the guys that they hired and then the players that they go out and pick and who they tie themselves to, right? That's ultimately going to determine the successes or the failure of the build. But just some insight on like Aikman meeting those two guys before Jeff Hafley. Mike Vrabel was the Texans defensive coordinator in 2017 and then got the Tennessee Titans job. Goes through Tennessee, has an AFC Championship game appearance, has a 5-3 playoff record. Mike Vrabel does. 3 of those wins obviously came this year in New England, going for the wild card round and now playing in the Super Bowl. Vrabel has a 59% win percentage as a head coach and a 5-3 playoff record, and is now playing in the Super Bowl and just won a conference championship between the time he had in Tennessee, in which they were always competitive until the bottom dropped out, and the first year in New England. DeMeco Ryans was the defensive coordinator in San Francisco from 2021 to 2022 before he got the Texans job. Ryans has a career win percentage of 63% and 3 playoff wins in 3 seasons, 1 wild card round win in each of the last 3 years. So it's pretty good company to put Jeff Hafley in as far as like young defensive coaches who made a strong impression on Aikman the first time he did production meetings with those guys in coordinator roles to invoke those names. Now, I think it's fair to question what other coaches maybe gave Troy that same vibe that he didn't mention talking to Rich Eisen. And obviously he's going to want to put the best of that candidate of coaches out in front because he had a hand in the decision-making process that leads to Jeff Hafley. I recognize that. But those are 2 really compelling names to know that Troy, in his travels, if you will, those are names that remind him of the impression that Jeff Hafley left on him. Now, we're going to talk about one of Jeff Hafley's hires next on the program. Make sure you guys stick with us. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with local TurboTax experts in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms, work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert did not file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate. Get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. This episode of Locked On Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. February can be a lot. There's flowers, candy, stuffed animals, a lot of talk about relationships. And honestly, you can feel like everyone else has all their stuff together in their relationships in life. And maybe you feel like you're the only one that doesn't. But here's the truth. Whether you're married, dating, single, or just focusing on you, most people are still figuring it out. No matter where you are in your romantic journey, therapy can help you find your way, can help get you clear on what you want, what feels heavy, and how to take some pressure off of yourself. It's easy to assume everyone else has the perfect relationship, but most people are working through something. Therapy can help you recognize patterns that might be weighing your relationships down. It can help you communicate better, set healthier boundaries, and stop carrying everything alone. BetterHelp has licensed therapists in the U.S., and they do the initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. And if you want to switch therapists, you can do that at any time. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. The Nathaniel Hackett hire, or reported hire, because I don't know where this one's at based on what the CBS reports that just came out yesterday have the status of this as. But the Dolphins, it was reported last week, Nathaniel Hackett was coming in to be the quarterback's coach. And boy, did that have some folks distressed. Nathaniel Hackett, he was not good in Denver. He went 4-11, didn't make it to the end of his first season with Russ, who's been a train wreck for 6 years, by the way. But that's neither here nor there. Then he goes to New York with the Jets. and it doesn't go good. It goes quite bad, actually. And Hackett this past year was a consult for the Packers defense to bring offensive insight to defensive execution. Tabbed to be the quarterback's coach. Nobody liked to hire, but apparently one team liked to hire. So much so that CBS Sports is reporting from Matt Zenitz that Nathaniel Hackett is, quote, among the early possibilities for the Cardinals' offensive coordinator job. Recently accepted Dolphins QB coach position. So, accepts offer. Now, suddenly, Mike LaFleur, brother of Matt LaFleur, who Hackett worked with last year, gets the Cardinals head coaching job, needs an offensive coordinator. There's 21 offensive coordinator changes across the league this year. And now Hackett's up, apparently, reportedly, this came out last night from Matt Zenitz from CBS Sports. So if you were wringing your hands about Nathaniel Hackett as the team's quarterback's coach, which I think it would have been, it would not have been a role that I would have been particularly worried about, assuming that this comes together and Hackett ends up leaving for Arizona, just because somebody in is the Twitter replies, or was it on YouTube? I don't remember where it was. They mentioned the Peter principle, which I had not been familiar with, but I actually very much liked it relative to NFL coaches. And if you're not familiar with the Peter principle was a book that came out in the 60s. Introduces a concept that in hierarchy, employees are promoted to their level of incompetence, where they remain because they no longer look good enough to be promoted further. So you keep doing a good job, and then you get a promotion. Then you do good at that job, and then you get promoted. And then all of a sudden, you stop doing good once you reach a certain rung on the ladder, and you no longer are viewed at an attractive light because you're no longer surpassing and exceeding expectations. Like, there's a chance Nathaniel Hackett's been a quarterback's coach before in other places. He was a quarterback's coach in Jacksonville. He was an offensive coordinator in Buffalo, and then Jacksonville, and then Green Bay before becoming the head coach in Denver. Certainly don't think he's an NFL head coach. Might not be a good offensive coordinator in a bad situation. But you don't get 3-4 hacks at being an offensive coordinator by not being a good position coach if your background's quarterbacks, right? So that Peter principle that was invoked, I thought was very helpful to kind of wrap my head around. Like, okay, this is why I think the hire of Hackett, or the acceptance of Hackett of the offer, and I don't know where the Arizona job is at. I just know that this report came out last night about 8:00 p.m. Eastern time, that Hackett was amongst the early considerations for offensive coordinator. I wouldn't have been bothered one bit by Nathaniel Hackett, because I'm not hiring to be the head coach of the team, and I'm not hiring to be the offensive coordinator. But this is where I do get to pump the brakes a little bit. If you lose Nathaniel Hackett now, if you said last week, you closed last week, it said, great, we could check that box. Done. Nathaniel Hackett's going to be the quarterback's coach. And now all of a sudden, Nathaniel Hackett ends up getting offered the Arizona offensive coordinator job, and say he takes it. Right, regardless of whether or not he would have play calling duties there or not, an offensive coordinator title and presumably salary is going to be higher than that of a position coach. You go take the higher promotion. Nathaniel Hackett wasn't an offensive coach at all last year. He was a defensive consultant and analyst with an offensive background. You could jump right back in the saddle as an offensive coordinator after what happened in New York and Denver. Great, I would too, right? So it's a matter of whether or not he gets offered the job. But if he gets offered the job and he leaves to take an offensive coordinator spot, who are you going to have as your quarterback's coach now? Because, again, there's 10 head coach changes across the league that have varying degrees of monumental change from those coaching staffs. There's over 20 offensive coordinators that are changing across the league. This is a very alarming amount. What does that do for the candidate pool now that it's the first week in February? Part of the thing that I appreciated about what the Dolphins did with their coaching search and their GM search is they went fast, right? You contrast this to Atlanta. Atlanta does their hiring. They hire Matt Ryan to be the president of football, And then they fired Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot at the very jump of the offseason that Monday. They were both out, right? They fired them both. They didn't finalize a GM hire with Ian Cunningham until like a couple days ago. It took them the whole month of January to go through the process. It took Miami 2 weeks to interview and hire a GM, decide to fire the head coach, and then interview and hire a head coach. It took 2 weeks. Like you were, I think, the third or fourth head coach domino to fall out of 10. You got a pretty good jump on the rest of the league, despite the fact that you went into the offseason with a coach in place and you went through interviews for 3 days before deciding you were going to move on from the head coach. If you get this spot now kicked out of the queue now, that would be my worry for the 2026 staff is what's your you don't have a high appeal quarterback room to work with, right? So now your sales pitch is what per se? Well, you get to work with so-and-so, or you're going to have a chance to work with so-and-so in the draft or free agency or via trade. But like, we got our plan. It's probably not going to be Tua Tagovailoa. He's continue to expect he's not going to be on the roster this year. And even if he was, what's the selling point there for a quarterbacks coach if all things are equal and you got a bunch of other staffs across the league that are replacing quarterbacks coaches? It really puts you in an awkward spot to fill that job for 2026. One thing I think the Dolphins can do to navigate this challenge is you look at the staff that they have in place right now, right? Or the reported staff that has been reported to be in place. You got offensive, defensive, special teams coordinators. We question mark Nathaniel Hackett, a quarterback's coach, but then you've got a running backs coach and Liddell Betts, Tyke Tolbert, the wide receivers coach. John Embry's out at tight end coach. That has not been reported yet. Zach Yenser and Matt Applebaum as offensive line coach and assistant offensive line coach. Then you go to the defensive side of the ball. You got your D-line coach, you have an assistant D-line coach, you got linebackers, corners. You have a pass game coordinator in Ryan Downard, who came from Green Bay. Can you get a pass game coordinator on the offensive side of the football and have that be somebody with a quarterback background? Because at least that way, if you can offer a promotion to somebody else's quarterback's coach, it kind of opens you back up into the talent pool to say, hey, if you're the quarterback's coach / pass game coordinator, which I believe was Darrell Bevel's title before Bobby Slowick showed up in 2025. So if there's a pay raise, technically a promotion by title, I think that's how you navigate this a little bit if you're the Dolphins and Nathaniel Hackett ends up leaving for Arizona, as has been reported as a possibility. That would be kind of where my brain would go if I were the Dolphins staff trying to figure out, okay, if this happens, where do we go from here? Speaking of the offensive side of the ball, we have a scratch-off lottery ticket. Our first one. We're going to talk about it next here at Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines. Dinner can be a big one between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules. Having an easy, reliable dinner plan can make a massive difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, taste, value, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. There's over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, free dessert for life. You must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. Let's be honest. Nobody starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings, managing payroll spreadsheets. That's where Gusto comes in. Take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is an all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from one place without the hassle of hidden fees. Unlimited payroll runs once monthly on a single price, which means there's no surprise charges at the end of the month. And their automated tools like offer letters, onboarding materials, and direct deposits can save you hours every week. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL to get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's right, 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. One more time, that's gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. Lottery ticket. It's lottery ticket season time. And Ryan, I'm going to shout you out here on the show because I wrote this story for, he doesn't follow me on Twitter. I'm not going to feel bad. I wrote, welcome to lottery ticket season on A to Z Sports. And it's about the transaction. The Dolphins signed wide receiver Terrace Marshall Jr., right, former second-round draft choice out of LSU. And I can tell you a little bit about Terrace. I remember doing his scouting report in the 2021 NFL draft. He caught like 12, 13 touchdowns on that 2020 or that 2019 LSU team that had Burrow and Chase and Justin Jefferson, like one of the greatest college teams of all time. This guy got 10 plus touchdown passes on that team. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Marshall and who he is as a player and his journey to this point. But he's a former second-round pick who spent last year on a practice squad and did not take a single snap. It is the definition of a scratch-off ticket. And Ryan replied and said, might be the most expensive signing we will have this year, given our cap, ... Ryan, please listen to the show. We did it yesterday. We did that exact show yesterday, and I guarantee you they will sign some modest, not $100 million contracts, maybe not even $50 million contracts, but they will do their contract extensions with guys that they want to keep, and they will find a way to nail down some meaningful free agent additions. It's just not going to be gangbusters, and quite frankly, every time the Dolphins have tried that, it's blown up in their face, so I, for one, am not mad about it. But I promise you, a guy who spent the year on the practice squad last year is not going to be the most expensive free agent signing the Dolphins had because he's going to be a minimum salary player. Marshall drafted 59th overall by the Carolina Panthers in 2021. 6'2.5", 205 pounds, ran 4.4 flat at his pro day in 2021. Had a 39-inch vert and a 10.5 broad jump. So the explosive height, weight, speed element of his game was really what he hung his hat on as a player at the college ranks. His best season in the pros, he had over 400 receiving yards his second season in the league. He has one career touchdown pass. He has just over 800 career receiving yards. But he's only 25. He'll turn 26 in June. So still a young player despite several years in the league. Obviously has physical gifts. Was on a roster last year in Philadelphia where I do acknowledge, between A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and the other names that they brought in there, Jahan Dotson, the tight end group, there's not a lot of room to go around for added opportunities. I recognize that. If you ask me right now, does Terrace Marshall Jr. make the roster in 2026? I'd probably bet no. That's the definition of a lottery scratch-off ticket, right? But if the Dolphins, they're going to look for, I guarantee you this, they're going to look for more names like this. Kind of like the Greg Dulciches of last year, right? Highly drafted guy. For whatever reason, it hasn't come together. Juju Brents was another example of that. And you're just hoping to catch lightning in a bottle with one or two guys. And they caught it last year with Dulcich, and they looked like they were going to catch it with Brents, and then Brents got hurt. And that's kind of been the book on Brents. But I'm glad Juju Brents is going to be back again this year because I want to give him an opportunity to play and win a job. And if he gets hurt again, then you don't re-sign him, and you paid him $1.5 million for 2026, and you move on with your life. It's only a few $100,000 more than minimum salary because you picked up the last 2 years of his rookie contract when he was available off waivers. Right? So that's where this team is going to have a bunch of competition, and this team's going to turn over a bunch of the roster yet again. They've done it the last couple of years, but at least they're doing it for the right reasons this time because they're resetting the salary cap books. And there's a regime change where they're kind of wholesale picking the best parts of the remnants of the past group to use as the foundation in which you use as the launch point for this group. And I think the good news, you want the good news. I think the foundation of this year's roster is a much more attractive one to me than the 2019 one when you moved on from Quinn and you moved on from Tannehill and you moved on from Tunsil and you moved on from all your leading production players at pretty much every major statistical standpoint. You moved on from all of them from 2018 to 2019. You were down to the studs. And I don't mean studs like good players on the roster. I mean the studs of the foundation, right? This is not as extreme as that. I don't think it has to be as extreme as that. As long as you go about doing your business the right way and you prioritize the right things and you don't let shiny objects distract you from the task at hand. But that means you're going to have more competition for roster spots and playing time for guys like this that you want to have them at your disposal. You want to have someone on the roster because you might catch lightning in a bottle. It's not quite the same thing as Zach Sealer, where Zach Sealer was a waiver wire claim from Baltimore. The Ravens just had a numbers game problem with their roster, and the Dolphins gobbled them up and developed them, and they've reaped the benefits of it. This is a little bit more guys who have clear physical tools, but haven't put it together. I don't want to say it's like the Island of Misfit Toys, but it's like you're pooling guys that didn't work the way they were supposed to. Scratch off tickets. We got our first one. And I would bet however many they get, I bet they hit on one or two. Maybe it's Terrace Marshall Jr. It's probably not. Right? That's the trajectory of the career that he's had in the NFL. But I like that we have our first hit in this regard, in the fact that they have found their first one that they're going to place the bet on and then start scratching. Right? I don't expect everybody to get Gus, Pennsylvania's second most famous groundhog. It's the Pennsylvania Lottery mascot. He goes, keep on scratching, right? Keep on scratching these lottery tickets. You never know what you might find. But that's going to do it for us here today on the show. We get the scratch off lottery ticket with Terrace Marshall Jr. We have Nathaniel Hackett potentially getting poached before he even starts with Arizona. And we have Troy Aikman dishing on how quickly he knew Jeff Hafley was a strong candidate for a head coaching position. That's going to do it for us down the show. Appreciate you guys checking it out. Keep it locked in right here, Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I'll talk to you again soon. Fins up.